I didn't expect a cup of vending machine coffee to change how a whole company worked. But that's what happened. It was the coldest morning of that winter, the kind that felt like the air itself was holding a grudge. The buses were running late, my gloves were missing their pair, and I was already regretting the "I'm always first" attitude that made me leave the house before dawn. When I reached the office building, the automatic doors hissed open, spilling a blast of warmth into the empty marble lobby. It was 6:12 a.m. The security guard glanced up from his phone and gave me the same nod he gave everyone. Polite, indifferent, already tired. The company was called Valon Industries, and it looked exactly like what you'd imagine from the name: glass, chrome, and the quiet hum of money. I was a winter intern, which meant I existed somewhere between invisible and replaceable. That's when I first saw her. She was mopping near the elevators, wearing a faded blue uniform that looked one size too big, her gray hair tied back with a rubber band. I remember thinking she looked too fragile to be there that early, surrounded by the chill and the echo of her own footsteps. "Cold morning, huh?" she said without looking up. I nodded, blowing into my hands. "Guess I overestimated my jacket." She chuckled. The kind of low, kind laugh that sounds like someone who's seen enough to not take the weather personally. Then she reached into her cart, pulled out a paper cup with a lid slightly bent on one side, and held it out to me. "Here, it's not Starbucks, but it's hot." I hesitated because that's what interns are trained to do. Hesitate before doing anything remotely human. But she just stood there, hand steady, smile patient. I took it. The coffee was awful. Burnt, metallic, like the inside of an old kettle. But it was the first warmth I'd felt all morning. "Thank you," I said. She shrugged. "You look like someone who forgot he mattered." The words hit deeper than they should have. Maybe because she said them without pity, just observation. Like she'd seen that same look 100 times before in this building. We talked for a few minutes. I learned her name was Margaret, though everyone called her Mags. She'd been cleaning the building for 18 years. Longer than most of the bosses have been alive, she joked. She told me she worked the early shift because the world was quieter then, and quiet was underrated. Before I left for the elevator, she tugged at her scarf, a thick wool one with threads unraveling at the ends, and without asking wrapped it around my neck. "You'll catch your death in that excuse for a coat," she said. "I can't take this." "It's borrowed," she interrupted. "You'll give it back when you stop shivering." I smiled. Deal. When the elevator doors closed, I caught her reflection in the metal panel. A small woman standing under fluorescent lights, looking like someone who'd carried more weight than her shoulders should allow. That day was long, the kind that starts with frost and ends in exhaustion. But every time someone ignored me in a meeting or brushed past without a nod, I felt that scarf around my neck. It smelled faintly of detergent and mint. Strange combination, comforting anyway. When I left the building that evening, she was gone. Her cart was parked near the service door, mop still damp, gloves folded neatly on top. I meant to thank her again the next morning. But the next morning was when everything started. I got in even earlier, 6 sharp, partly to prove I was serious, partly to return her scarf before she thought I'd run off with it. The lobby was empty except for the cleaning cart, but she wasn't there. The mop was still leaning against the wall, a bucket half full of gray water beside it. The only sound came from the coffee machine humming softly in the corner. Something about the stillness felt wrong, like walking into a room that should have laughter but doesn't. Looking for someone? It was the head of security, a tall guy named Blake, whose uniform looked tighter every week. Yeah, the cleaner, Mags. I wanted to give this back." He frowned. "You mean Margaret?" "Yes, sir." He looked at the scarf like it was evidence. "She's not supposed to be interacting with staff." "Policy." "Interacting?" I repeated. "She gave me coffee. I was freezing." He raised an eyebrow. "Still, there are protocols." He walked off, muttering something into his radio. I stood there holding the scarf, feeling suddenly stupid for thinking kindness was harmless. By the time the rest of the office started filling in, suits, chatter, clinking heels, I had folded the scarf and set it gently on her cart. Around 10, I saw two men in gray suits I didn't recognize heading toward the service hallway. HR badges. Their faces were tight, rehearsed. Later, when I went to grab a printout near the break room, I overheard them talking to the head of cleaning staff. "Unauthorized contact with employees," one said. "We can't have that." "She's been here forever," the supervisor murmured. "Everyone likes her." "That's not the point." Their voices dropped after that, but I didn't need to hear more. That afternoon, the scarf was gone. The cart, too. The floors still smelled of lemon cleaner, but the air felt heavier. I asked around quietly. No one knew what happened. Or maybe they knew and didn't want to say. When I left that evening, the security guard avoided eye contact. That told me enough. She was gone, and all because she'd handed a freezing intern a cup of coffee and a scarf. I didn't know it then, but that decision, that small act of kindness, would end with the CEO and 20 executives standing outside the building, staring at the ground like the world had turned upside down. But that comes later. That night, I hung her scarf over the back of my chair and couldn't shake the thought, if this company could punish warmth, what else was it hiding in the cold? I came in early again, not out of ambition this time, but because I didn't know what else to do with the ache in my chest. The lobby was too bright. The lemon cleaner smell hit first, like they'd tried to scrub last night off the tiles. Mags's cart was gone. No scarf on the handle. No paper cup by the vending machine. Just the security desk and Blake behind it, flipping a pen like he was timing a lap. "Morning," I said. He nodded without looking up. "Badge." I tapped the reader. Green light. The turnstile clicked. I didn't move. "Where is she?" I asked. "Who?" "Margaret." Pen paused. "Vendor matter," he said. "Handled." "Handled how?" He let the pen fall flat. "Don't get involved, kid. You don't want your name in that email chain." My name was already in 100 email chains that meant nothing. I went upstairs with the knot riding high in my throat and did the one thing interns are allowed to do without permission. I asked questions that sounded like I was gathering context. I learned two things quickly. One, the cleaning staff weren't company employees. They belonged to a contractor called Clearworks Services. Two, unauthorized contact with staff is easy to define when the rulebook is a mirror. They can point to anything they like. At 9:15, HR sent a building-wide note about maintaining vendor boundaries to ensure safety and efficiency. No names. Just a list of bullet points about where conversations should and shouldn't happen, with a reminder that policy exceptions create risk. The email felt like a door clicking shut. I forwarded it to myself, then wrote back to HR for my intern address, careful and respectful. I wrote that a cleaner had helped me on a freezing morning, that no safety risk existed, and that the tone of the memo might discourage decency. I asked, very lightly, if the situation could be reviewed. I hit send and immediately regretted the word decency. It sounded emotional. Emotion is a bad currency here. 10 minutes later, my manager, Laura, popped her head over my cubicle wall like a lifeguard spotting a splash. "Hey," she said, "walk with me." We went to a glass huddle room where you can see everything and privacy is just an illusion with better chairs. "I got a ping from HR," she began, "about your email." "I kept it professional," I said. "You did," she agreed, "and I get where your heart is, but you're touching a live wire. Someone got fired for giving me coffee and a scarf." She folded her arms. "No one got fired. Vendor reassignment. And it wasn't because of you. There were other issues." "What issues?" She held my eyes just long enough to communicate that there were no issues. There were only words that removed responsibility. "Look," she said softer, "the right thing and the policy thing sometimes don't match. We all pick our battles. You pick this one, and this company will pick you." I should have nodded and let it die. Instead, I said, What does it pick me for? Caring? Her mouth tightened an inch. For being a variable. We don't reward variables. On my way back to my desk, I passed the break room and saw two Clearworks employees unpacking supplies. Neither was Mags. One was a guy about my age, expression locked, moving like he'd been warned about everything in advance. The other was a woman in a fresh polo shirt with the logo still crisp. She saw me, offered a small, cautious smile, then looked away. I didn't have the right to put fear into strangers, so I kept walking. At lunch, I took the service elevator down to the loading dock, the place where deliveries breathe and people forget to pretend. The air smelled like cardboard and wet rope. A white van sat with its back doors open. Inside, neatly stacked, were the lives of people who clean other people's mess. Boxes of bleach, sleeve wrap mops, plastic wrap rolls of bags. And there, balanced on a folded moving blanket like a relic, was the scarf. I didn't touch it. I stood with my hands in my pockets until a Clearworks supervisor came around the corner with a clipboard. He saw me, saw my badge, and straightened. "You can't be here," he said automatically. "I was returning something," I answered. "It belongs to someone on your team." "Margaret." His face flickered with recognition, then smoothed. "We don't have anyone by that name assigned now." "Where is she?" He checked a line on the clipboard that I doubt had an answer. "Reassignment," he repeated like a newscaster reading an old script. "Can you get a message to her? Tell her thank you. Tell her He shook his head once. Not rude. Final. The sound of a policy hitting the floor. I rode the elevator back up with empty hands and a full stomach of anger. On the 16th floor, the executive's corridor smelled like leather and quiet confidence. I don't know what I thought I was doing when I turned left instead of right and kept walking until the hall ended at a door with a small brass plate. CEO. I didn't knock. Of course I didn't. I'm not a lunatic. I stared at the door and tried to imagine what kind of temperature lived behind it. Then I went back to my desk and did something both smarter and dumber. I wrote a letter, not an email, a letter. I opened a blank doc and started with, "My name is," and everything after that was simple, stripped, and true. I wrote that a woman who had kept this building clean for nearly 2 decades gave me a scarf on the coldest morning of the year, and for that she lost her job. I wrote that policy should protect dignity, not punish it. I wrote that culture is just the loudest rule we tolerate, and ours had gone quiet where it mattered. And I wrote that I didn't want my name on a future where kindness counts as risk. I didn't use the word decency. I used the word accountability. Before printing, I deleted my name from the header and the company logo from the footer. I didn't want it to look like I was filing a form. I signed with my full name at the bottom, because if you don't sign the hard things, they become easy to ignore. Then I printed 2 copies. One I slid under the CEO's door like a coward with a spine. The other I folded into thirds and put in my backpack, like proof that I meant it, even if no one else did. At 3, Laura came by again, a shadow of worry under her eyes. "Did you drop something upstairs?" she asked. "I printed a report," I said, which was true in the way a forecast is true about rain somewhere. "Okay. Do me a favor. Stay off the security team's radar for the rest of the week." She hesitated. "And if anyone asks about Margaret, say you don't know." "I do know," I said. "Then say you don't," she replied, tired now. Sometimes survival is a script. I sat through the rest of the afternoon like a person waiting outside an operating room. Screens changed, people passed. Nothing happened. At 5:40 I packed up, because interns don't earn points by being furniture. In the lobby, the new Clearworks pair were mopping in careful circles, heads down. Blake watched them like he'd been asked to watch a kettle that never boils. When I pushed out into the wind, a voice called my name from the edge of the loading bay. I turned. Mag stood half in shadow, coat buttoned to her throat, a reusable tote over one shoulder. The sight hit like warmth in the bones. "How?" I started. I came to pick up my last paycheck, she said. Her smile was the same, but softer around the eyes. And my scarf. You kept it safe. I tried to return it. I know. She stepped closer. Up close, I could see the small tremor in her hands. Don't worry about the rest, sweetheart. They said reassignment, I blurted. Are you okay? I've been okay through worse than men with clipboards, she said. I'll be working across town by next week. Buses go everywhere if you let them. I wrote a letter, I admitted, voice low like it was a crime. To the top. She tilted her head. That's brave. It felt late? The next morning started like any other. Same gray sky, same commute, same coffee that tasted like it had been brewed by someone who hated mornings. I didn't expect the letter to matter. I'd written it mostly to be able to look at myself in the mirror and say, You tried? When I got to the building, the doors didn't open right away. A cluster of people was standing outside, murmuring, shifting from foot to foot. Security wasn't letting anyone in yet. Blake stood near the entrance, radio in hand, face unusually stiff. What's going on? I asked. He didn't answer, just said, Wait here. It was 7:48. By 7:52, black cars started pulling up, sleek, tinted, quiet. People stepped out who never showed up this early. The kind of people whose names were always followed by letters. CO, CFO, CHRO. They formed a line along the sidewalk, shivering in their expensive coats, trying not to look confused. Then a town car arrived. No license plate frame, no vanity. The driver jumped out, hurried around to open the back door. The CEO of Valon Industries stepped onto the sidewalk. I'd only seen him in pictures before, press shots, LinkedIn articles about visionary leadership. In person, he looked smaller, not physically, but in presence, like someone walking into a scene he didn't authorize. He looked at Blake. Everyone's here? 23 executives, sir, and staff. Good. He didn't go inside. Instead, he took a folded paper from his coat pocket and glanced around. His voice was calm when he spoke, but there was a thin wire of anger running through it. Who here knows what this is? He held up the letter. No one spoke. The paper fluttered in the wind like it wanted to get away. This was slipped under my door yesterday, he said. No signature on the outside, no request for attention, just words, honest ones. He looked around again, meeting eyes. Do any of you know a woman named Margaret O'Connor? A few people frowned, unsure. Laura, my manager, shifted beside me. She knew. Everyone in facilities knew, but no one spoke. She worked in this building for 18 years, the CEO continued. She was reassigned yesterday after offering help to one of our interns. Help, apparently, being a violation of policy. He let the sentence hang in the freezing air. I'd like to hear which policy that is. The silence was brutal. You could hear breath, the wind, the faint whir of the HVAC system from inside the sealed glass doors. Then someone, a VP from operations, cleared his throat. Sir, the vendor policy states that, direct personal contact. The CEO turned sharply. Contact? She gave a freezing young man a scarf and a cup of coffee. The VP's mouth opened, shut. Tell me, the CEO said, quieter now. Who authorized her removal? The VP hesitated. It was an HR coordination call based on facilities feedback. So HR then? Another executive spoke up. It came through facilities first. They flagged it after. After what? The CEO snapped. After she reminded one of our employees what decency looks like. Nobody answered. The CEO folded the letter again, carefully, like he didn't want to damage it. This company was built by people who cared enough to stay late, clean up, and come back early. Somewhere along the way, we started mistaking control for culture. His gaze moved down the line of executives. You all know I'm not a sentimental man. I don't like speeches. But I read this letter last night, twice, and I didn't sleep. He looked toward the doors, because I realize this building is spotless, and our humanity's the thing collecting dust. I felt my throat tighten. Around me, people stared, some pale, some pretending they were part of an unrelated meeting. Then the CEO said something that made every head snap up. As of this morning, every executive who approved that dismissal is suspended until further review. There was a rustle, protest forming but not quite daring to live. "Late is still in time for someone," she said. She squeezed my arm once, short and sure. "Keep your kindness. Don't trade it for a badge." A van door slammed. She glanced over her shoulder. "That's my cue." "Mags," I tried. She gave me the smallest nod. I've ever felt like a blessing. Then she walked away into the kind of cold that asked questions you can't answer. I stood there long enough for Blake to wander over, hands on his belt. "You good?" he asked. "No," I said, "but I'm done being quiet." He studied me like he was calculating how much trouble I was worth. "Don't be foolish. I'll aim for useful." He snorted and went back inside. I went home, sat at my kitchen table, and stared at the letter copy until the words stopped buzzing. I figured I'd done my part. A small protest filed against a large machine. Maybe it would land in a recycling bin. Maybe a secretary would skim it and delete my name from a list of safe bets. Maybe nothing. But that was just the beginning. "You'll remain off-site," he continued. "You'll attend a meeting next week in the cafeteria, not your offices. You'll hear from every department we usually ignore. Maintenance, reception, cleaning. You'll listen before you talk." He turned to Blake. "Lock the executive floors. Access restricted until further notice." "Yes, sir." Blake's voice carried through his radio, crisp and certain. Somewhere above us, the magnetic locks clicked. The CEO turned to the rest of us. "Where's the intern mentioned in this letter?" The words cut through me like glass. My breath caught. Laura's eyes darted toward me, tiny shake of her head that said, "Don't." But I raised my hand. "That's me." The CEO's gaze landed on me. Not sharp, not kind, just precise. "Walk with me." The crowd parted. I followed him through the front doors into the lobby. The warmth inside felt false now, too polished, too sterile. He walked slow, hands behind his back, letter folded like a secret in one palm. "What's your name?" he asked. "Evan. Evan Grant. You wrote this?" "Yes, sir." "Why?" "Because she didn't deserve to lose her job, and because—" I hesitated. "Because everyone here pretends that's normal." He studied me for a moment, expression unreadable. Then he nodded once. "You're right. We do." He stopped near the security desk, looked at Blake. "Find out where Margaret O'Connor is. Get her here by 9. "Yes, sir." "She'll be reinstated," he said loud enough for half the lobby to hear, "and compensated for the disruption." I exhaled so hard it almost hurt. He glanced back at me. "You're an intern?" "For now," I said. He smiled faintly. "Let's change that." Before I could process what he meant, he walked off toward the elevators, the letter still in his hand. When I stepped back outside, the executives were still lined up, shifting uncomfortably as the cold bit through their coats. None of them spoke. Some avoided my eyes. A few looked like they wanted to, but couldn't. Blake gave me a small nod as I passed, a quiet concession. Laura caught my sleeve as I reached the curb. "You realize what you just did?" she whispered. "I didn't do anything," I said. "He did." "No, Evan, you lit the fuse." I didn't answer. That afternoon, the email came, subject line, values and accountability. It was from the CEO himself. It talked about rediscovering the purpose behind the policies, about rebuilding the culture from the ground up. The last line read, "Kindness is not a risk. It's the foundation of everything that lasts." By 5 o'clock, the letter I wrote was pinned on the company bulletin board, framed in the break room, and circulating on LinkedIn under a title I hadn't given it. The intern's letter. It felt unreal. My inbox flooded with messages, some supportive, some cautious, a few angry. People I'd never met thanked me for saying what they'd been thinking for years. And yet, I couldn't feel proud. Not yet. Because Margaret still hadn't come back. And then silence. The kind that means something's gone wrong. The silence didn't last long, but it felt like an entire day lived inside a single held breath. By 9:07 that morning, the lobby doors opened again. A silver bus pulled up, the kind used for employee shuttles. Blake and 2 HR reps waited near the curb, talking quietly into radios. I stood a few steps back, coffee untouched, heart trying to claw its way out of my chest. When she stepped out, the first thing I noticed was the scarf. It was wrapped around her neck, the same frayed one she'd lent me on that freezing morning, only now it looked deliberate, like a flag no one else could see. Mags walked slower than I remembered, but with that same small, proud tilt of the chin. She saw me instantly. Her smile didn't change, but her eyes did. A flicker of disbelief, then something softer, like gratitude too heavy for words. The CEO was waiting inside, not in his office, but right there in the lobby, among everyone else. He didn't make speeches this time, just walked up to her and offered his hand. "Ms. O'Connor," he said, "welcome back." She shook his hand carefully, like she still wasn't sure this wasn't a setup. "Thank you, sir." "I owe you an apology," he said, his voice quieter now. "This place forgot what decency looks like. You reminded us." He turned to the crowd, employees, managers, interns pretending not to stare, even the cafeteria workers who'd come up from the basement kitchens. "From today," he said, "any employee, any level, any role, can nominate someone for recognition, not for revenue, not for hours billed, for humanity." He looked around, because if we can't see the people who hold this building together, we don't deserve to stand in it. The applause didn't come right away. It wasn't that kind of moment. It started slow, one person near the reception desk, then another, until the sound filled the room, heavy and raw. Mags's eyes glistened. She tried to wave it off, but the CEO shook his head gently. "Don't," he said. "Let them thank you." He gestured toward me. "And you, young man, you've just been promoted. We'll find a better title than Intern with Integrity, but for now, that'll do." A few people laughed nervously. I didn't. I just nodded. "Thank you, sir." When he left, the lobby slowly emptied. The HR people followed. The executives disappeared into elevators that now opened for them again. The applause faded, leaving a kind of hush that felt clean. Mags and I were the last ones standing there. She reached out and straightened my collar like a grandmother would. "You shouldn't have done all that," she said. "Maybe not," I answered, "but someone had to." She smiled. "You risked a lot for someone you barely know." "I didn't risk much," I said. "I just said what everyone else was too afraid to." She chuckled. "That's the trick, isn't it? Fear makes rules that people call policy." We sat for a few minutes on the bench near the big glass windows, watching the morning thaw into sunlight. She told me she'd gotten a call late last night from someone she didn't expect, saying the company wanted her back, car and all. "They even offered to double my rate," she said, laughing softly. "Told them I'd settle for my old one if they meant the apology." Then she pulled something from her tote bag, a thermos, metal dented on the side, steam curling out from the lid. "Coffee," she said, handing it to me. "Real coffee this time." It was strong, bitter, good. People passed through the lobby, the same ones who used to ignore her, but this time they nodded. Some smiled. A few stopped to say her name out loud. She returned every greeting, steady as always. At noon, when she went back to work, she paused by the elevator. "Keep your heart warm, Evan," she said. "It's rarer than you think." I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded. She disappeared behind the silver doors, leaving that faint scent of lemon cleaner and mint again, somehow comforting now. A week later, a framed photo appeared in the main hallway, near the company's values wall. It wasn't a picture of a product, or a building, or the CEO shaking someone's hand. It was Mags, holding a mop in one hand, smiling like she'd just finished a good joke. Underneath it, a new plaque read, "Kindness is policy." The photo became a quiet landmark. People stopped there on their way to meetings, sometimes just to look, sometimes to think. And the company, for all its size, its Polish, its corporate gloss, felt a little more human after that. things didn't turn into a fairy tale. HR was still HR. People still whispered about efficiency and optics. But I noticed the small things change first. An accountant brought breakfast for the security team. A junior analyst stopped to help the cafeteria staff unload boxes. People started saying good morning and actually meaning it. The kind of tiny revolutions that never make headlines, but change the weather inside a place. As for me, my badge changed color. Project Associate, it said now. It wasn't a promotion that meant power, just permanence. But it felt earned. Every morning I still came early. Same building, same routine. But now there was always a cup of coffee waiting on the reception desk. No note, no signature. Just warmth in a paper cup. I knew who left it. Sometimes I'd catch her reflection in the glass. Mags, moving quietly through the halls, like she always had, invisible in the best way. The kind that doesn't need to be seen to make things work. That winter the cold came back harder than before. But it didn't bite the same. Because every time I wrapped that old frayed scarf around my neck, I remembered that in a world built on titles and rules, a borrowed scarf and a cup of cheap coffee were enough to change everything. I never got the scarf cleaned. Didn't need to. Some things are supposed to carry a little history with them, a little warmth someone else left behind. And if you ask me what I learned from all of it, I'd tell you this. Kindness isn't weakness. It's proof you're still human in a place that keeps trying to make you forget.